morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Actually, I should also say good evening. I can see some people from um, many other time zones here. Thank you for taking the time today to join me in this webinar on feature-based project management. This webinar is sponsored by Rommana Software, the leader in integrated application lifecycle management. I will share with you what my experience is in how to manage projects with features in mind, actually with features in the center of attention. I will also, at the end of the webinar for the last 15 minutes, I will spend some time to share with you or to demo for you how Rommana ALM as an application lifecycle management tool performs all the things that I will be talking about. Not because I want you to purchase Rommana ALM, but because I want you to see how features are supported in a tool so that you can look for those same features in whatever project management software you are using. Hopefully you can find these things. To my knowledge, there is not too many, perhaps none of the existing project management tool, of course, including Microsoft Office, Microsoft Project. None of them really supports many of the features I will be talking about. But again, the focus here is how to manage our projects with features in the center of attention. Right, let me get started here. Since I see no complaints, I'm going to assume everyone is hearing me fine. To start, just want to make sure that the terminology is clear. I use the word feature in this presentation as a synonym of a requirement or user story. Sometimes I will say requirements, sometimes I will say user story, but the generic term is a feature. All right. I don't know if I need to convince you that focusing on features are important, but I will convince you that when we manage our projects, it is very critical to focus on features. But if you look in general at any software systems we work with, features are everything. In fact, the bottom line is features are what the customer really cares about. It doesn't matter. When you hire someone to do some work in your house, all right, and they start talking to you about tasks, about scheduling, these things are important, but they are only important in the context of the deliverables, what you are going to get. So you want to see what you are going, how much you're going to be paying for certain things you will get, how much time it is going to take for certain things you are going to get. All right. You may not care much about who is going to do the work, except the general question that do you have qualified, licensed people to do the work? But as far as individuals, you really don't care as a customer, right? Now, if you look at features, they are what takes time in a project. We design feature, we code them, we test them, we deliver them. Okay, so everything we do in a project is really around the feature. Okay. Now, when we speak about risk in software projects, or even in any other project, all right, it's important to speak about risk. But what does it mean to speak about risk without, and I'm talking about project risks here. What does it mean to speak about risk without associating that risk with a deliverable? Because again, as a stakeholder, as a customer, all what you care about, how does the risk impact what you're supposed to be getting? If the project team has risks that do not impact the deliverables, you don't care. It doesn't matter as a customer and as a stakeholder, right? When we speak about money and the effort, it's all about deliverables, it's about features. most importantly, when a change happens in one of the features, it affects other features. Hopefully, if the project team is doing a good impact analysis. And when it affects other features, it may impact their delivery date. And it may even impact their cost. So that's why when we have change requests, assuming a traditional life cycle, when you have a change request, someone has to analyze a change request carefully to see how that change request will affect everything else in the project so that they can adjust their time and budget. I think I'm going to stop here because I still have a lot of materials to cover. I believe that we all believe that it's important to focus on features. The chart you see in front of you really showing you everything we do in a project that's related to feature. And none of those you can speak about in isolation. You always have to speak about those things in the context of a feature. To start with, from a project management perspective, as I said, all your effort estimation, timeline, and the progress and risks and the tasks we need to perform. The tasks I'm talking about here are things like analyzing the feature, designing the feature, coding the feature, testing it, and so on. These have to be talked about in the context of the feature itself. Even internally within the project team, when they assign things to people, the project manager needs to know who is assigned to work on what task for what feature. Funny enough, Agile people sometimes tell me that we don't assign anything. The Agile team just grab whatever user story they'd like to do and they work on it. Great. This might work with a team of 5 or 6 or 7 people, but it doesn't work with larger teams. No one would want to manage a project not knowing who is doing what and when he or she is going to finish and how much time they're going to take and how much does it cost in terms of time. No one want to manage a project like that. So again, I've heard this more than once when I presented this webinar before. I've got into a lot of discussion on LinkedIn, and somehow some Agile people say, no, we don't need that. It's all self-managed team. Well, of course, self-managed team does not mean that we cannot manage the team. We'll leave that for now because I don't want to get into some religious discussion about Agile or not Agile. Okay, when you look at testing, which is the next thing here, if you're talking about test cases, if you're talking about bug reports, if you're talking about scenarios or acceptance criteria or anything, we know that we build acceptance criteria for Agile projects in the context of user story. That we know that for sure. So you want to always be able to look at test cases and test scripts and the bug reports in the context of a feature. In fact, this is very critical because we all know about the concept of requirement coverage. And requirement coverage is not vague, does not vaguely mean that we have to cover all the requirements. No. Requirement coverage is about how deep did we test every requirement or every aspect of the requirement. With that being said, your requirement coverage matrix should show the number of test cases, the number of scenarios, the number of bug reports for every feature in your software. Someone says, yeah, but that's the feature of a test management tool. Sure, but you cannot separate that from the effort estimation and the risk and everything else you need to worry about when you have issues and you have failing test cases. Of course, development team cannot work without focusing on features. So when you're talking about a feature, you're talking about what database tables we're going to build or what database tables are going to be modified with this for this feature. Adding a feature or modifying a feature necessarily means that we're going to change something in the database, or sometimes I should say. Okay. All the design documents need to reflect to link it back to features. Okay. I have asked this question many times in many projects. How often do we keep track of the traceability between features and the code components and design components? None. None. If we get a bug report here on a specific feature, obviously the developer who was not around at the time this feature was implemented needs to go back and fix the problem as it relates to that feature. In trying to fix the problem, he or she needs to know what code components are related to that feature and what database tables are related to that feature. If he or she doesn't, then that's a problem. That's why it takes forever to fix a problem if the person is not familiar with the code or the design. All right. There is a bunch of other models and documents here on the left. They all have to do with the feature. And of course, this will become more clear when you see some examples. Okay. When we build any one of those models, whether it's a state model or a decision table or any other model or even data model, we are looking at a feature. If we're not looking at features, then you always have the question, why are we building this? Okay. So this is the general picture. Let me move on here and tell you what it means really to manage projects with features in mind. And I feel like I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to go quick here. You have 2 slides here. Allocating and managing project resources and roles and responsibilities for each feature. You want to be able to do that. Okay. You want to be able to understand each task as it relates to each feature. It doesn't make sense to say Joe is going to be doing the design. Design of what? One person could be doing the design of one feature, another person doing the design of a different feature. And the same person who's doing the design for feature 1 might be writing the code for feature 2. All right. Now, the concept of actions is very interesting. Actions are something more and beyond tasks. Actions are things that we need to do in order to deliver the feature. And it can be almost anything, like checking into a third-party component we want to buy, finding out the interface with another system, because these kind of actions takes an effort from a person to go and investigate. All right. And in any project, we have those actions. And I get surprised sometimes. Where are those actions? Where do we write those down? Of course, we may have something called action item lists. Okay, great. But do we link it back to features? How important that action is? And what feature gets impacted if this action does not get completed? And if the person responsible for performing that action finds a problem and finds that he or she cannot complete the action, which feature will be impacted? Now, forgive me, I'm talking here in cases of large projects. Okay. I mean, of course, if you have a project of 5 to 10 people that's going to take 6 months to finish, forget about all that. You don't need any of this. I'm talking about larger projects, which might take a couple of years, several years, with a couple hundred people working on them, not geographically co-located. So someone has to manage this. And that's where I come from. I've seen government projects, I've seen defense projects that are a nightmare because no one knows what's going on. Especially, they don't even have a tool to help them with that. Again, when we speak about risk, we have to go back to say which feature is impacted by that risk. All right. It goes without saying when you build test cases, when you build the scenarios, when you build acceptance criteria, it's all in terms of the feature we're going to be testing. Bug reports, very interesting that tools for bug reporting do not have a field that says which requirement or which user story this bug is related to. Well, trust me, I've looked at all of them. If you know of a bug tracking tool that allows you to put that very simple piece of information, which is what feature, what requirement, what user story, tell me. I mean, I was surprised to see that. Why is that important? Because we need to go back when we try to fix that problem. We need to go back to that feature. Find out at least who is the developer who wrote the code and did the design. Not to put the blame on them, although we should, of course, but at least that is the person who would be most capable of fixing the problem, or if he does no longer have this kind of responsibility, at least he would be a good person to consult about how the database was designed or what kind of design decisions he or she has made at the time. But then knowing the feature that a bug is related to allows us to go back all the way to the specific database tables that this feature uses and many other design components and so on. All right. I'm going to continue here and show you this very simple chart. This is simply saying here are tasks, and I have an estimated number of hours, and the actual number of hours. And possibly we can calculate percentage of deviation. There's no features here, by the way. And so this is what I call, this is the minimal project management practice. And I always like to ask people, how many of you believe that your projects is maintaining this kind of data? Certainly they have an idea about the test. So go ahead, if you believe your project is keeping a track of estimated hours and the actual hours, not necessarily percentage of deviation, for each task that's being performed, regardless of what of features. Go ahead and raise your hand. Go ahead and raise your hand. And I forgot how to do the adding automatically. Well, out of my 89 people here, I have 3 hands up. Do you think your project is doing this, but you're not aware of it? Let me tell you, it is a disaster if your project is not doing that. I want to hear some feedback from you. If your project manager or whoever is running the show is not keeping a track of number of hours, just estimated number of hours. If he or she is not doing that, what are they managing? My God, when you hire someone to do work in your backyard, they estimate number of hours. And I'm assuming they write them down somewhere, such that if they exceed the estimated number of hours, they know they exceeded your budget or they exceeded their estimates. See, that's what I'm talking about. This is a minimal practice. This is what? This is like maturity level 0. I don't recall with CMMI, is that even level 1? I think if you're on level 1, that means that you're not doing this. So you've got to be doing this for level 1. So if you're not doing it, I mean, anyone can correct me. I see Robin Goldsmith is attending with me here, so Robin can correct me if I have mistaken the level number. So I think if a project manager is not doing this, then your project is not even level 1. All right. So I don't know if it even makes sense to go and ask about other things. Maybe this is trivial, and that's why people are not doing it. So now, what if we include features? By the way, the matrix or the table you see in front of you here is strictly imported from Rommana ALM. This is one of the reports. And that's the name of the report there, estimates by feature. Okay, forget about the money. Okay, the cost in terms of money, you only worry about them if you are a contractor and you'd like to see how much it's going to cost. But look at the number of hours. And now what you can see on the left is each feature, each requirement, each user story, and how much time you're estimating for design, coding, unit testing, how much these are the tasks. And we're just keeping track of the estimated number of hours and the actual number of hours. Again, the cost is a function of multiplying the number of hours by the hourly rate or the average hourly rate. In fact, Rommana ALM uses a much more sophisticated model to do that. If you want to calculate the cost, it takes a task like that and finds out how many people are involved in it, how many hours each one is going to spend, and not only that, but what is the hourly rate of each one of them, and it multiplies the number of hours everyone is going to spend by his or her hourly rate, and adds things up and says this is how much this task is going to cost. Okay, but you can simplify it. Let's just go for the very simple model, which is simply a requirement or user story on the left, and what tasks. Now, of course, sometimes people have the requirement and they estimate how many hours. Maybe, but that's not useful. That's not useful because how are we going to know if we spent more time in design than what we're supposed to? So the question for you now, I'm going to bring all the hands down and I'll ask again. Do you know if your project does anything like that? I'd like to see show of hands. Surprisingly enough, sometimes I see more show of hands in this question for this question than the previous one. Although the previous one is trivial, but sometimes I say maybe if it is trivial, people do not want to do it. 1, 2. Now I have only 2 hands. All right. And I cannot recall if these are 2 hands. These are the same people who raised their hands on the first question. Again, in my opinion, the state of practice in our project management is terrible. Terrible. We're not managing the projects. Please, if you are a project manager and you believe you are doing a great job, I'm sure you are, share your feedback with me on the questions panel. You have the questions tab, click on it, share with me anything you believe is positive so that we can all learn about it. Tell me if this makes sense. Again, as I said before, Agile people will always come back and say, hey, we don't care to know how many hours it's going to take. We estimate the story points at the beginning, and we give the user story to someone to work on it. And they don't keep track of how many story points he or she used. Not only that, they said we don't give people things to work on. People take whatever they want to work on and work on it. So if your project is running this kind of agile, then don't worry about this. Leave it alone. I'm gonna bring the hands down because if anyone else wants to raise their hands for another reason, meaning that he or she wants to speak up, because you can certainly speak up. We have time to open your microphone and allow you to say whatever you want to say if you'd like to. So in this case, you would raise your hand. All right. So to me, that's again an essential practice in project management. I don't know how anyone can manage a project without keeping track of the estimated and actuals for each task. All right. I don't think that even CMMI has been very specific. I mean, CMMI requires you to just keep track of things. What things they were not so specific. All right. As always, anytime, if you have a question or a comment, click the questions tab and write it down, and I will read it, I will answer it, and if it is relevant, I will share it with everyone else. All right, we can go one step further. And that's now about work assignment. Who's doing what? Who is doing what? Fine. We are self-managed teams. Everyone picks up whatever they want to work on. But as someone who's running the Agile project, do you care to know who is working on what? Again, if your team is only 4 developers, you don't have to document this anywhere. You talk to the developer in the morning, he or she says, I'm working on this user story. You say, okay, good, thank you. But this stuff is not for a team of 4 or 5 people. Okay, we know now the scaled Agile framework is being applied to large projects of hundreds of people in several teams. Sure, every team can be small, but not 4 or 5 people. So now what we're talking about at the top here, these are the different tasks that are related to different features. And here's who it was assigned to. So now I can see that this team member number 2 is writing the code for feature 1, for feature 3, and feature 4, and feature 7, whatever the feature is. But I can also, that same person who's writing the code for these features is designing the code, is designing feature 4. So he or she is doing the design, doing the coding for feature 4. Okay. Yes, it looks like from my table here that it is the same person who's doing the design and the coding, but not necessarily, because the design might involve user interface design or database design. And the user interface design needs people with certain skills that are different from the developers. Some people tell me that I'm overthinking it. Well, you can't overthink project management. When a problem happens, you need to find out how you can rectify the problem, because you have a customer who's waiting for a deliverable. And you need to be able to shift things around based on what's happening. Okay. Does it make sense to you that I ask if you know that your project is doing this? Let me ask the question. If you know that your project or project manager is maintaining this kind of data for each feature, who's doing what task, Go ahead and raise your hand. 1, 2. I'm glad the number is small so they can count by visually here. Yeah, 3 now. I have 3 hands up. This is like 3%. 3%. If you are not a project manager, I really strongly suggest that you take this webinar. You will receive a link. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive the link to the recording. I really encourage you to share the link to the recording with your project manager, just to get their feedback. Just see what they think. Very, very simple. Tell them, I attended this webinar today. A lot of this did not make sense to me. See if it makes sense to you. And if your project manager needs to react to it and wants to communicate with me, I am available. My email is mhanna@rommanasoftware.com. The domain name is at the bottom of the screen, mhanna. You or anyone who wants to communicate with regard to this topic, please go ahead. I just want to hear from a real project manager what he or she thinks. I already heard it from many Agile people. All right, let's move on. Do we keep track of scheduling, dates, timelines? Do we say this feature is going to start this day and this day and end this day and that's it? Again, as we said, each feature has number of tasks. By the way, looking at these tables, you think it's a lot of work. It's not. When there is a tool that logs everything for you, I mean, someone has to go and say, I'm doing the analysis for this user story, and I'm going to start it today, I'm going to finish tomorrow. Done. Put it into the tool. The tool will keep it. If he or she did not finish tomorrow, then we'll see when he or she is going to finish. And they go back to their estimates and say, okay, I estimated 10 hours between today and tomorrow because I was busy with other things, but in fact, it took 15 hours. If that information is important for you, this is important level of maturity. This is maturity. If you're not doing this, then you're not going to get anywhere with your software process. All right. Again, Robin Goldsmith is one of our what do I say? Most senior instructors, and that's not a reflection of age, of course. And he's also our expert in process management, software process management. And it would be interesting if I can get some reaction from Robin, because I think if we can have some discussion here, it might be useful for other people attending the webinar. Okay? But I'm sure Robin and I can have side discussion as well. But I don't mind at all if Robin shares his opinion and his feedback on the questions panel. All right, let me move on. This is another practice here, which is task duration by feature. Now we come to that timeline. The Gantt chart, or whatever chart you're using. I don't understand, honestly. How do we use Microsoft Project to manage projects? How? I could never use it because it doesn't allow me to do this. This is timeline in context of features. Features are in the left here. and the different colors represent the different tasks. And this is what the tool does. This is another report that's taken right from Rommana ALM. So I didn't spend the time to color those cells or anything like that. This is a report that's exactly this timeline by feature. Okay, and this is how it is in Rommana ALM, and of course when you define a task within Rommana ALM, you choose the color for the task, and you choose the color for the task only for the purpose of showing it differently on different reports. So now it tells you that this feature here or this requirement or this user story, and if you note something interesting, the requirements or the features are links. They are underlined. You might be wondering why they are underlined, because they actual links on the report. If you are on the actual report and you click on this, it takes you to another screen where you can show the actual requirement. And if the requirement text that you see in front of you is a bit confusing, it's because they are actual requirements from the Rommana ALM product. So we're using the product to manage the effort to maintain the product. So this is an actual requirement within Rommana ALM. Okay. Make sense? So now you can see we're going to have a meeting here on June 17th for this feature. Perhaps it's a meeting with the customer. We're doing a prototyping here for that feature from June 15 to June 18, but probably this meeting is to discuss a prototype with the customer, interestingly enough. And the actual tools, if you click on this cell, it's going to give you the details of this task, because it is a task. All right, and you can see now after we finish the prototyping on June 18, someone is going to start writing the code. Now, of course, if you want to see who that someone is, you click on this and find that coding is done by Joe, and Joe is estimated to spend 15 hours. And you can see also if he completed it or not. And if not, if he did, then you would see the actual number of hours. I don't want you to get too busy thinking about the mechanics of the tool. If you can do this in Excel spreadsheet, that's fine. But that's the point. Doing this in Excel spreadsheet is a nightmare. Even trying to do it in Microsoft Project is a nightmare. Because in Microsoft Project, you're going to have tasks like prototyping of requirement number 1. That's a task. Coding of requirement number 1. That's another task. Meeting for requirement number 1. If you ever want to relay the same kind of information in Microsoft Project, I gave up. I gave up on Microsoft Project. And if any one of you knows another software that does this, I would love to know about it. So maybe I should ask, how many of you know that your project team is doing something like this? And if you do, all the hands are down. So if you know that your project team is doing something like this, I'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and raise your hand. And then if you raise your hand, go ahead and click on the questions tab and share with me the name of the tool you are using or your project team is using. Anyone? No, no one. No one is doing that. Perhaps we have to think, am I out of my mind to expect this to happen? Is that too much? Are we supposed to care? Is that important? The truth is we did not do this because the tools we're using are not allowing us to do this. And we convinced ourselves over the years that it's not important. Even in testing, you see that I'm breaking testing to test design, test execution, and of course, if you ask anyone, any tester professional, they say, oh, we just call it testing. We're going to be testing. The painful thing is that sometimes test teams do not even have a concept of a test design. Really. They think testing is about writing scripts and executing them. And of course, we all know that writing scripts is not a test design. But that adds a lot of discipline to our software process, development and testing and everything else. Okay. How are we doing with time? Wow, got only 20 minutes left. Now, this one, I'm going to refer to it as a minimal practice again. This is a requirement coverage report. This report is imported from Rommana. Requirement test coverage report that shows for each requirement or each user story how many test cases we have. Okay. These two columns are interesting. We keep track of how many of those cases were actually designed and how many of them are exploratory. Because we keep track of both. Because it doesn't make sense that we design 65 test cases and we run them, and then the tester goes on the fly and performs more tests and we don't keep track of them. I don't know why. That's why I was teaching yesterday a course on test design for Agile projects, and I insisted that even if you're doing exploratory testing, and this happens quite a bit in Agile projects, you have to document that. Now, positive and negative testing. I'm very interested in knowing how many of our tests are positive, how many of them are negative. Why? Because my experience suggests that we have to have at least 50-50, because we don't do enough negative testing. And when I ask people, I don't want to dive into negative testing and positive testing, but I want to tell you those are important. Now, this tells you how many pass, how many fail, and how many have not been executed yet. And it gives you two statistics at the end here, the percentage of completion, which shows how many test cases have we actually executed out of the total. And this is the percentage of readiness, which tells you how many test cases have actually passed out of the total. So the 63.22% here is really dividing the total pass, which is 55, by the 87 here. Now, I have seen some projects doing just these three columns: pass, fail, and not executed, and maybe they have them just for the total. So I'm asking to do this for each user story or requirement. And of course, down here, if these are all the requirements in your release, this is showing you the total of the release and the percentage of readiness for the release. Any question about this? Let me peek here. Robin, I want your feedback on anything you wish. Thank you. All right. Obviously, I don't have any question. Now, does it make sense to ask if your team is doing this? And if some of you are really test professionals, then you should know that. How many of you think that your test team is doing this? Because this is useful not only for the test team, but for the development team, for also the release management and everyone else. How many of you think that your test team is doing this? No one? No one? Do you think we should be doing this? At the very least, maybe let me simplify the practice. Okay, forget about positive testing, negative testing, exploratory, pre-design, forget about that. How many of you know that your project, your tested team keeps track of the number of test cases for each requirement or user story? I'm not talking about the total here or across all project or across all requirements. For each requirement or user story, how many total? And how many passed? How many failed? How many need to be executed yet? Okay, at least we got one hand up. Thank you, Jack. Julie. Okay, now as I simplified the practice, I get more people saying, yes, we do that. But not too many. Still three people. Keep your hand up, please. Because I have 3 people. 3 people just doing the simple thing, which is for each requirement or user story, how many test cases there, how many passed, how many failed, how many have been executed yet. Okay. If you think it's useful, try to evolve this a little bit. Now, for those of you, forgive me, I by no means I intend to criticize you or anything. But really, if you're there and you're not even keeping a track of the number of test cases for each feature, and how many passed, how many failed, how many have not been executed, please think about it. Think about it. If you're taking my test management course, you will know the criticality of this. All right, let's move on. The last one I'm going to show you here is the design components and the code components related to requirements. I spoke about this earlier when I was talking about what it means to manage projects with features in mind. So here are my user stories or my requirements, and here simply you'll have one matrix like this for design components and one matrix for code components. I'm more interested in the code components, but also design components like database tables are very important. Because that simply means that if we have a problem, if we receive a bug report, and the bug report had to do with requirement number 9, whatever that is, then I can look at this matrix. By the way, I'm going to tell you this very quick. I started this practice in the late 80s when I was working for Unisys Corporation as a developer. And I used Lotus 123, if any one of you remember that, to do this. And this was the only way we could survive. Because we were dealing with a system written in assembly code, and we receive bug reports from the customers, and no one knows anything about the assembly code and how it is structured. It was not structured, of course. That assembly code, for your information, was written back in the late 60s. Terrible thing. I had not started my software career in the late 60s. I didn't start until 75. And this was my practice at the time. And how many years now? From late 80s until now? Still very relevant and critical. Why? Because if you're dealing with a large system and you know that there is a problem with requirement number 9, A software engineer can easily go and look and say, okay, it looks like, let me move this here. It looks like that requirement is implemented in two places, this component and this component, whatever the component means. And those are the two places I need to look at to find what the problem was. This is critical for software maintenance. All right. Then you get to this sort of marketing slide that shows you what Rommana ALM does. Rommana ALM is a fully integrated application lifecycle management tool. It has everything you can ever wish to have to manage a software project over time, over the years. It has project management component. It has, of course, issue management, bug tracking here. It has requirements and user stories here. It has test management, test design here, document management, everything you can imagine, even far more than SharePoints provide you. You have use cases. If your project is using use cases, you have a lot. You have your change management, which has to do with the change requests, impact analysis. Everything is here, and of course, on top of all that, you have collaboration. The most interesting thing is that all this is done in one database here in the middle. This is a SQL Server database that holds all the information, and that's why when you run a report, you can run a report across all these pieces. You can have a report that pulls the data from the database that relates to everything from requirements. So why Microsoft project cannot do the kind of things I was talking about? Because it does not have these things. All what it has is this. And it does not have the requirements or the user story there. It does not have anything about test management there. So of course, we don't expect a simple tool like Microsoft Project to do the kind of things I was talking about. We expect an ALM tool, an application lifecycle management tool, to do this. Okay, I have 8 minutes left. If you are interested, I'm keeping this until the end. I can go now and just show you, give you a glimpse of the Rommana ALM so that you can see how this. I want to just, and of course, you feel free to leave if you're not interested. Hold on. Okay. So I'm going to very quick here. Samuel Hanna, that's not me, but that's the one of the project managers. I'm going to log as a project manager or product owner here, or a Scrum Master. I'm going to just open one project. And by the way, one of the products here or the systems is Rommana ALM itself. And we have all these projects. In fact, this is the project we are working with currently. Okay, we started April 19. We plan to finish it, I believe, end of June. Okay, and this has all the features for that has to do with the medical industry. Rommana is really getting into supporting the medical industry. We have a number of customers who ask it for that, so we're doing this. All right, so this is a current project. I'm not going to open it because I simply do not want anyone to see the features. Let me open an older project here. And when you open a project, it gives you that wonderful dashboard. That dashboard is, again, an interesting tool, a useful tool for project managers because it tells you everything. You can see everything. You can configure this dashboard any way you want. You can see everything you need to see, open the issues, the status of test execution. You can scroll to see other charts here. Issues by status, issues by priorities. And again, you can configure this to include other things if you want. There are tables. Okay, so let me move on and just go straight to reports. Okay, and you have all these reports for project management. So if I just click here, I just want to show you how simple it is to do things. Okay, so I have here the what's the timeline? I have not, yeah, here, project timeline. If I do this, I can filter any way I want, but I'm gonna run just the report. Very quick. And now here's the same report I showed you. See that? All the requirements in this specific project was all the timeline. Okay? And I think this is the report I imported, if I'm not mistaken. It looks familiar though. This is the same report. Now I want you to pay attention to this thing at the bottom, which it did not appear in my other picture that I showed you. Project level tasks. So these are what we call requirement level tasks, whether it is designing or prototyping, coding, whatever. Okay, and you see what I'm talking about here? Every task here, you can tell who's doing it and how many hours. Of course, the data is not there, okay? But you can see who's doing the task and how many hours are estimated, how many hours actual. If I click on this gives you, if I just put the pointer, it gives you some limited information about the requirement, but I can easily click on this and it tells me that, do you want to see the requirement details or do you want to associate tasks? No, I want to see the requirement details. Okay, now I am into the requirement screen that shows me the details of the requirement. That's the beauty of having an integrated ALM. Okay, it's still opening the requirement. And that's now what we're looking at is the requirement screen, highlighting the requirement I clicked at, and here are the details of that requirement on the right here, with all scenarios and test cases and actions and tasks, everything here. Okay, I'm gonna close that. We don't need to look at it. Okay, so that's one of the reports. Let me close this report. Let me go back to reports. Come on. All right. Any specific report I want to show you here? These are all the test management reports, test case details by requirements, requirement test coverage report. That's the one I was showing you. Again, I can filter the report by requirement status, requirement priority, and so on, but I'm going to display the report. And very simple. Gives you this pie chart right there to tell you the status. And now here is a list. Here is the actual report that you've seen that was reported to Excel, sorry, Microsoft Word, because you can report, you can export the report here. Here are all the requirements, and here's the requirement names. Here is the same thing I showed you. I told you it's there. It's systematic here means a pre-designed. Just the terminology between my slides and the system is not. I think we're starting to call it now pre-designed, not systematic. Here's the ad hoc as opposed to exploratory, failed, executed, not executed, passed, and so on. All right. Of course, I'm not hoping to show you much of the Rommana tool in 8 minutes, but if you'd like to explore the tool yourself, please feel free to go and just to get a free trial. You don't have to download anything. This is all in the cloud. So when you go here to packages and the pricing, and you'll be surprised how low the pricing is, but go ahead and select any package you want. And down here is a complete Rommana ALM down here. That includes all the pieces. And you can go ahead and, this is RommanaSoftware.com, by the way. And you can request a free trial. It gives you 60 days for three. It actually gives you license. It's 60 days license for 3 people. So you would be the site manager, and you would assign the team members, the 3 team members you want, and you can have an actual project to play with. Right? Thank you so much for being with me today. I'm glad that I was able to finish just on time. Please make sure you look at other seminar. I think the next webinar I am doing is Rommana for medical devices. So because I'm going to explore all the features that have to do with medical devices. So I'm going to be actually introducing the features that are in the project that I just showed you. Okay, because this project right here. So my development team is working on those. By the time I get to do the webinar, those features are going to be complete, and I will demo those for you. So thank you again. Hopefully to see you in other webinars.